Hi, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about how to reinvent yourself midlife and thrive after having experienced relationships with narcissistic individuals. First of all, I want to acknowledge your strength for being here. Making a decision to leave a narcissistic relationship takes a lot of courage and is a crucial step towards your own healing. Those of us who have experienced those relationships, we know how they can really destroy our sense of self, our self-esteem, and we start to even doubt that we know what the reality is or not. Those relationships are incredibly toxic, and essentially it can take a very long time for a person to heal and to overcome the consequences of having had one or multiple relationships with narcissistic individuals. Obviously, those who are here watching this video would already know that the nature of a narcissistic relationship is all about control and manipulation. The narcissistic person would often use strategies and gaslighting techniques to just make us doubt our own reality and self-doubt ourselves constantly, to the point where we just don't even know if we are or not seeing the reality or not. And another thing that can happen with the person who is an empath, who got involved with a narcissist, is that we internalize blame, especially those of us who had early life experiences with narcissists. In my case, for example, is like that. I grew up in a household that had two narcissists, and you end up feeling like everything is your fault, and you kind of think like, oh, maybe I'm the one who is the problem, because they make you think this way. They somehow go every day and with those psychological, verbal, or sometimes even worse kind of abuse, just destroying your sense of self. So you live to go to life thinking that everything is your fault, and you're the one, you're the bad person, because everything that happens to them is your fault, right? So I remember that I have this sister, she's still alive, but we're not in touch. She once said to me when I think I was 7 or 8 years old, that because I was born, her life became horrible. The worst thing that happened to her was me being born, and that she only wished that I had never been born. I have heard much worse than that and been through much worse than that. But it's just the kind of thing that if you hear it too many times, and as a kid or as a person, you start to believe that maybe that's true. It's like a powerful dynamic, and usually involves the narcissistic person and someone who cares too much, who essentially is a normal kind of caring person, who end up considering too much the needs of the other person. Although it can be quite soul destroying and really take a long time for a person to overcome, it is possible. It takes a lot of work. I personally, I have, like I just mentioned, being in a household who had narcissistic individuals, and then I happened to marry a narcissistic man when I was in my early 20s. That had the biggest impact, I think, in my life. And now, at the age of 52, I can say that safely that I have managed to overcome the whole trauma, the whole, the whole train wreck that it is having to go through those experiences. But because I had multiple encounters with narcissistic individuals in terms of developing relationships with them, unfortunately, it took me more than 20 years to heal and to overcome the difficulties. But because I took 20 years plus to heal, doesn't mean that that's going to be the same for everyone. I think there is a possibility of completely reinventing yourself, whether you are midlife or not, and thriving after a narcissistic relationship. Even though at the time when you leave, it feels like you have to build your sense of self again. It is like a weird feeling, because those relationships, they are so consuming and take so much out of you and your life, your energy, that if you manage to remove that person from your life, there is like nothing left. Is in a weird way. You feel like completely empty and strange, and you don't know anymore who you are, because obviously the time you spend with those individuals, they gaslighted you to the point of you not even knowing what to think, what to do. You had to kind of, they would tell you basically what to do and what to think. And so when you go on your own, you might have to take a moment to give yourself grace, understand that you have taken a very important step, which is choose you, choose your life. The number one thing to do once you decide that you had enough and you're ready to move on, whether you're going to move physically away from the person, or you still have the person and somehow in your extended family, who knows, maybe someone you work with, is having radical acceptance to the fact that this person will never change. And that can be quite difficult if you're dealing with someone who is a family member, who you care for, who you have an emotional connection, and it's not as simple. You don't feel like you can just move away and basically leave the relationship behind. They live their life around an illusion that they have constructed. It's quite complex, obviously. If you want to hear the whole what makes a narcissist, there's a lot of good videos out there for you to see, but they essentially live a life around the illusion of this person that they have created, and usually is associated with delusions of grandeur. Or they can be also a covert narcissist, which is a person who comes across like a victim. Everything that happens out there is someone else's fault, never their fault. And then they kind of they act as a narcissist, but in a quite passive aggressive way. So there are two types: the ones that are overtly narcissistic, they kind of demonstrate, and they can be quite mean and outspoken about those traits. And there are others who pretend or come across like they are just a victim of the circumstances, and those are even more dangerous in my opinion. You feel sorry for them, they come with a story, and the next thing you know, you're hooked, and then they go away, disappear, and then they come back saying that they missed you, or they're gonna change, that this time is gonna be different. Don't believe. It's not gonna change. They're just gonna bring you in back, and then once they think they have control over you, they will start again treating you in the same way they did before. So I think it takes time to reflect about. It's not an easy task, and it can take as long as it takes. Give yourself grace and understand that, for example, if it's someone you love, I know for a fact that some people have adult children who have narcissistic tendencies, and it's the only solution that this person had is to grieve and give up on a relationship with that adult son, because she realized that he unfortunately had all the traits of his father, and it's not like she could do anything about it. He would never change. He would never really stop devaluing her and disrespecting her and doing things to hurt her, because everything is her fault, right? As in his mother. So she had to give up having a real relationship with her son. So there is a lot of people out there like this person I'm describing who had to really grieve the loss of that relationship that's never gonna happen. And I understand that deeply, but it's something that if you're watching this video and you are in your head thinking, how I'm gonna do this, this is a family member, consider, do you want to survive this? Do you want to somehow, if you are in your middle age, in your 40s or 50s, or no matter what age you are, do you want to have a life after this? Because even though you might not take 20 years plus like I did, it still takes time to heal. So please come to terms with this, negotiate this in your head, have a clear plan of how you're gonna do, how you're gonna rebuild yourself, how you're gonna work again in building that self-worth working in your self-esteem, because we all know, as I mentioned earlier, one of the main things in relationships with narcissists is that we walk away completely depleted of any self-esteem. So please take time working on that. I spent years going over therapy and reading about self-help and going through all sorts of information that I could get my hand on to try to understand. And I remember that I still was having issues and I couldn't quite put my finger on, and only later in life, all my 40s, that I realized that I had to do inner work and heal my inner child, because I still had issues from my childhood that I hadn't really addressed, that I hadn't really acknowledged, and went through like a grieving and a healing process. The childhood that I never had, that love that I never received, that mother that I never had, that father I never had. And it's only in my middle age that I actually realized the nuances of that damage. And therefore, I'm just saying here, take time to go through that. Because in the past, when I left my family home, and I thought when I was young that after reading my self-help books, after going through a certain level of healing, that I was done. And I felt in a relationship with a man, which was my ex-husband, and that I don't wish on anyone. So one of the worst things can happen to a person is having had a traumatic upbringing, for example, and then doing some work but not really taking the time to go deep, and then thinking that you are somewhat kind of healed when you're not, and then without you realizing, walking again into a relationship with someone like that, with a narcissist. That, man, that is really hard to come back from. It's possible, but it takes a lot of work and determination, and you need to want to survive. You need to want to fight for your life. So once you have spent time working on your self-worth and your self-esteem by reparenting yourself, doing inner child work, all those terms that I mentioned, if you don't have any familiarity, just Google. There's a lot of so many good resources online that you can find to do help, or seek professional assistance as well. Seek therapy with someone who is qualified in working with individuals who have survived abuse in relationship with narcissists. That's so helpful. I would really recommend. And after you have worked on that, please, please, please spend a good amount of time considering your boundaries. What is important for you? What are your values? What you think are a basic human being mutual relationship should look like. Because I came from such abusive relationships, it took me a long time to actually realize, now hang on there. I think it's very important to respect my time, for example. It took me a long time to realize, oh, okay, I'm not just always available, I have other things to do in my life. Because for a very long time in my life, I would let people just demand my time and just be on prompt, available to people who needed to speak with me, or who needed to see me, or something like that. And I think that's I don't know, I don't think it's small anymore, but for some people this is small, but it goes into that boundary category. Because if you're always putting people before you, when you're gonna actually prioritize things that are good for yourself, when you're gonna actually prioritize your self-development, your self-care, your health, if you have been lucky enough to be able to find a new relationship with someone who actually loves you, who actually care for you, and let's say you have other family members who have narcissistic tendencies or something like that, they might create a huge havoc in your life just by being disrespectful with your boundaries. So boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. Because if you have strong boundaries, if you put limits and you communicate very clearly to individuals a kind of person you are, what they can expect from you and not, you, in a sense, you make them realize that they're not going to be able to get away with a lot with you. And that, already will pass the vibes to those individuals that you're not easy target, you know, you're not really an easy target. So go elsewhere. No, just don't come again, don't come to you. And another thing I want to mention is that once you have worked on your boundaries, try to find as well something that you never had the opportunity to look into it. Like, because if you're anything like me, I spend most of my life occupied and dealing with other people's drama and chaos and never really done anything for myself. I never, growing up, could play any sports or do anything really. I had no childhood basically. So when I was like in my late 40s, I just thought to start to run for sports as a hobby for myself, something that I just always had curiosity, could never do, and I decided to start to do. And you might think, oh, that's just something small, but it doesn't really matter. It's something for me only, that I'm not doing for someone else, because I spent my whole life just doing something for someone else, being available for other people, like, and being of service, like they say. And, running as a sport is something for me, something that makes me happy, benefits me, and that's fine. So find your thing, find your thing. And in my case, running has really helped me to work on my own anxiety, work in my well-being, clear my head. Sometimes I want to have think about things, and I go out there and I go for a run, and it really helps to clear my mind. So you try to reflect and think about what is the kind of thing, that a goal or something that something you'd like to do and develop. Could be big or small. Around your 40s and 50s, this is even more important, because there are so many changes that happen to a woman at this time in your life. In this case, talking to women, we go through the menopause, we go through relationships changing. Sometimes we divorce, sometimes we made redundant from jobs, sometimes we need to change careers. And if at the same time you're trying to heal from a narcissistic relationship, so it's a lot. It's a lot. So once you manage to go through the steps of understanding, processing, working your self-esteem, seeking professional advice if you think you're really going to benefit of that, setting your boundaries so that you don't give a chance to any other taker to come and start to try to play with your life, and then try to focus in attention in developing or seeking, follow your passions, something that makes your heart sing. Just, it's very important. And it's a cliche to everyone say follow your passions, but it is a thing, and it can be something simple as well. In my case is running, but for you it could be photography, writing, painting, who knows, making porcelain, cooking. It doesn't really matter. Something that you do that you think is going to add to your life and you never had the opportunity to do, because you see how this is going to become something that feeds your soul, that whenever you're feeling stressed, whenever you're feeling tired of the day, of the stress of the everyday life, you can always go to this activity. Do you know what I mean? And I think I don't need to mention this here, that this whole journey is an everyday process. There are days that you're going to do better. There are other days that you might feel like not so great. And be patient. Don't give up on yourself. And like I just mentioned at some point on this video, that I done some healing, and then I found that I hadn't really done enough for inner child work, and I end up falling in another relationship. This doesn't necessarily need to happen to you. I think I failed back then to set boundaries. I failed to really understand the importance of communicating clearly to other individuals what I can do and what I can't do. And I really would like to thank you for watching this video to this point. And if you feel so inclined, I would really appreciate if you could share in the comment section what are the steps that you're taking that are supporting your healing. You are not alone. There are many of us out there who have been through those relationships and we managed to heal. I know when we are perhaps in the beginning of the process, feels like we're never gonna get there, but it's possible. I am so proud of you for choosing yourself, for choosing to invest in your own life and your own well-being. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.